Back with you on Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Reminder, head over to youtube.com. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Put Locked On Sports Atlanta into your browser. Give us a review. Tell us what you think about the show. And, of course, follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. You know, looking at the Falcons roster and the battles that'll be coming up. So we get ready for mandatory minis coming up here real soon. And then we'll get into training camp, which literally is just over a month from right now. Hard to believe that there are this many spots that are either up for grabs or you don't feel so confident in. I was going through the list. If you figure 11 offensive players, 11 defensive players, and let's say let's say your punter and kicker, so 24 spots, right? I look right now and say, okay, who is pretty much guaranteed to be a starter, and especially guys that were here from last year. Right now, Jake at left tackle, Cordero Patterson at running back, Lindstrom at right guard, Pitts at tight end, Grady at one of the defensive tackle spots, A.J. Terrell at a cornerback spot, and Younghoe Koo is your kicker. Now, I think we have some idea of other guys that are figured out that are going to be started. Casey Hayward is going to be a starter, but he wasn't here last year. If we're looking at guys that were here last year that are going to be starters for this team, that's 7 guys. Out of 24, that's 7 guys. So obviously this roster is in a massive overhaul mode. And I guess, you could potentially throw Deion Jones into that, but there's a lot of rumor and innuendo, obviously, about whether Deion Jones is going to be here. So for right now, I'm not going to put Deion Jones' name on the list because he could very well be cut. He could be traded. He could not be part of this roster, very likely, coming up in, weeks or months, from right now. So you look at 7 guys out of 24 that you feel confident that from last year are ready to be your starters again. Now, there's a whole mix of guys that have been here on this team that have the chance to be starters. Marlon Davidson could be a starter. Richie Grant, Jalen Hawkins, right? I mean, you've moved on from some guys. So whether it's some of your pieces that you've drafted over the last couple of years, obviously Hennessy, Mayfield, McGarry, but right now, a lot of those spots are not set in stone. I think there's only 7 spots right now that you could set in stone. You could chisel it in granite and say, these guys were here last year. These guys are going to be our starters. Okay. And then from there, okay, I feel pretty confident that Casey Hayward is going to be a starter at one corner. I feel pretty confident that either Grant or Hawkins or both are going to be starters in the secondary. Michael Walker's probably going to be a potential starter, but maybe not. I feel probably Lorenzo Carr. You can sort of say if when it comes to some of these guys, but that's not very many guys. And that's also not many guys at some of the most key positions on your football field. Quarterback being one. Yeah, we think that Mariota is going to be the starter, but he is going to have some competition from Ritter. Yeah, we think that Ebiketie and Carter are going to be our starting outside linebackers, our pass rushing guys, but there's going to be some competition there. Whether that is a Michael Walker or whether that is a D'Angelo Malone or whatever, there is at least some competition there before we just go out and say, and forget, by the way, what, if you go online and you read what the depth charts, the depth charts don't mean anything right now. That's just fool's gold, and everything. I'm talking about that there's actually going to be legitimate competition because Marcus Mariota is going to be listed as your quarterback 1 right now, but that doesn't mean that if Ritter balls out in the preseason that he can't win that starting job. So it does tell you where the Falcons are right now as far as how bad, how unsettled the roster is. And I'll be honest with you, I can't even remember the last time, for several years, whether it was 17, 18, 19, those few years after the Super Bowl, you only had about 1 or 2 spots maybe that were up for grabs as far as who your starters were. Because you had your veterans in Matt and Julio and Devontae Freeman and, even Mohamed Sanu, and you had Jake and you had Alex Mack and guys like that, right? And then you had your young core that were pretty locked in. Debo, Grady, Keanu Neal, mixed in with the a few of the veteran guys, Trying to remember the safety that now my brain just went dead. I forgot the safety, but you had some of those guys that were your core main pieces. Ricardo Allen. There you go. My brain just kicked back in for just saying. See what happens when you get old? Your brain just eventually remembers some. So you had some of those pieces that you knew were starters, young guys, older vets, things like that. You didn't have very many spots that were up for grabs. Even with Vic Beasley here, you felt like coming off the Super Bowl, okay, for the next couple of years, we're going to have Vic here to at least be through his 5th-year option, and we'll have him as one of our locked-in starters. So you haven't had a lot of competition over these few years. So you look at this Falcons team right now and how much that they've have to go in and revamp the roster. And look, that's why I wonder how quickly at times this – we're not calling it a rebuild. We're not calling it a retool. We're calling it, or even calling it a reset. I don't know what their term is nowadays. They don't want to admit to anything. I get that they're trying to win, and I think that they will win some more games than what people expect them to, because I think they've brought in some good pieces, and I think they've drafted well, especially this year, that they'll get some net results right away. But you think about how sort of up in the air this roster is, it tells you about why a lot of people think that the Falcons could be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Why some people are picking them to be 3-14, 2-15, 4-13, right? There's a reason why. You've got this few positions, and one of them being kicker, right? I mean, out of your starting 22, you have maybe 6 guys year over year that you feel like they started last year for me and they can start this year for me. That ain't much. And we talk about some key positions: outside linebacker / edge player. We talk about inside linebacker. We talk about right tackle in the NFL. We talk about, potentially a second corner. We haven't even talked about safety. There's a lot of key positions on this football team that have not been figured out yet. And so that's what this, preseason, training camp, all that is going to be fascinating to see about, okay, what guys do we feel confident about going into this year with, and what guys do we feel like we can build around for the long term? We've got 3 spots on our offensive line that right now nobody knows who's going to be the starter outside left tackle and right guard. That's not a good position to be in. And there are guys that have been drafted on the roster that we just haven't seen perform up to their, capabilities. So we will see, but we're getting close to mandatory minis in training camp, and it'll all come around. But expect a lot of positional battles for the Atlanta Falcons. All right, we appreciate you being part of the show today. Thanks for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen. Don't forget, we want your second listen to be my friends Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste. ATL Day Ones is your show, speaking to the heart of the city of Atlanta. Braves, Falcons, Hawks, Bulldogs, you name it, man. They are covering everything for you. A couple of friends chopping it up, and always a good time there. Make sure you find them as well on our Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube page. Subscribe to that as well. And you can find it free and available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. We will be back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.